I'm excited now to welcome Mark Towler, Senior Product Marketing Manager, and Mark Singh, Senior Solutions Engineer, both from Progress. Mark, it's great to have you on. Take it away.
Thank you very much. Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. So this is actually serendipitous that we're first in line today because, there's a lot of fascinating content coming up on virtualization and virtual machines and virtual systems. I'm actually going to start us off a bit more on the basics and taking a look at what exactly is it that's underneath your virtual machines and why that matters. So I'm going to go over a few little slides giving an explanation of kind of our point, what we're talking about, how VMs and punch cards relate, why your infrastructure is important, what questions you need to ask yourself, and how to answer those questions. And then Mark Singh is going to give you a demo. So hang on for that. So first of all, and I know this is the question that everyone's been wondering about for the last 10 seconds since you saw that agenda slide, what do virtual machines have to do with punch cards? And I promise there's actually a connection. But the concept of shared computing actually isn't something that's new. Back in the old days, and when I say old days, I'd be very surprised if anyone on this call ever used a punch card. My father did, but I don't think anyone here is likely to use them. Some of us interested in computer history may have seen them or are familiar with the concept. But way back in the 50s and the 60s, when you had a giant computer, it was a mainframe that was the size of a room, and it was incredibly expensive, and it did all these calculations, which was great, but who was using it? Well, it was shared, and they didn't have networking. It wasn't anything nearly as sophisticated as what we're dealing with, but you could time share it. So there would be people who would get access to the computer, and students, for example, would be able to use the university computer, and they had a set amount of time that they could use, and that might be scheduled. So between 12 o'clock and 12:20 or 12:30, you've got that much time to run your program and use the computer. Now, the way you built a program back then was you input it onto punch cards. And these were used for a bunch of different things, often also things like payroll, a variety of things. But the main point was this was an analog way. You could punch a bunch of holes onto a card of a standard size that would be fed into that big mainframe computer that would look at all those, that would sense where all those holes were manually, or not manually, but mechanically detect all those holes, and that would give it a set of commands. So full programs would be a stack of cards, maybe 30, 40 inches high. It depends on what they were trying to run. So it was very important to have not only your cards in the right order, but, and this is where the warning on the bottom needs to be highlighted, it was very important that those cards be in good shape. And this has entered the popular lexicon. Do not fold, spindle, or mutilate. Folding or spindling, that's where you stick it onto a spike. You still see that in restaurants sometimes. Or mutilating it or getting it wet or doing something else in some way is going to damage the card. So big deal. What does that mean? Well, what that means is when you feed that into the system, that card reading device that's part of the mainframe is going to either chew up that card, destroy that card, or it's going to get it jammed in some way. And the impact of that is you've now damaged the infrastructure behind that computing device. And that means that not only are you unable to complete your job, you're unable to use the computer, but no one else is going to be able to use the computer. And I'm stretching the analogy slightly, obviously. I'm talking specifically about an input-output part of the system, not the entire system. But for all intents and purposes, that computer is not able to help anyone because the infrastructure is now damaged. And that's something that can be done by anyone who's not paying close attention to your cards. So like I said, it's a bit of a stretch, but I want to bring it up because I want to make a point here. First of all, shared computing is a new concept. We're far more sophisticated with it now, and you're going to hear a bunch of other people talking about the more esoteric uses of virtual machines and how they're set up. But the idea of getting a part of a machine and being able to use it for a certain amount of time or being able to use it for a particular use, that's not new. What is also the same, and what has always been the case, is that if there's a problem with the underlying infrastructure, it's not just impacting your program, it's going to impact the programs everyone else wants to run as well as everything else involved. So number one, you got to make sure that your network infrastructure is working. If there's a network infrastructure problem, whether that's something with modern equipment or whether it's something as simple as a wet card wrapped around that card reader and preventing any additional programs from being run, someone's got to fix it. Otherwise, the entire system is unavailable. And when it's, the next student coming in at 12:30 who needs 30 minutes of computer time, that's a problem. If it's 50 people who are trying to use the various virtual machines running on that server, that's a bigger problem. You've got to protect your infrastructure as part of protecting your virtual environment. So let's take a quick look at the importance of network infrastructure. Obviously, virtual machines need something to run on. There's some sort of underlying hardware, and we don't tend to think about it as much anymore. It's easy just to spin up a virtual machine and get it running. But virtual machine host devices don't exist in a vacuum. That device that your virtual machine is running on is connected to other devices. It's not just one server sitting there in a closet and everything's perfectly fine. It's got inputs, it's got outputs, it's connected to other systems, it's connected to stuff upstream and downstream. This is what we call the infrastructure, all right? It's not just one device. And that infrastructure needs to be working. Otherwise, your device that your virtual machine is working on, your virtual machine host, is not going to work properly. And for that to happen, you need to have adequate availability. It needs to be up. In other words, your device and all the infrastructure around it supporting it needs to be working. It needs to have adequate computing capability. All right? If you've got too many people overstressing the processor, things are going to slow down, things are going to start crashing. It needs to have adequate memory. So whether that's RAM or whether that's hard drive storage or any other type of storage that you're using, if you don't have the memory, again, everything is going to start slowing down. And most importantly, you need bandwidth. If there's someone else who's consuming 80% of the bandwidth to watch a high-def movie on Netflix, then input and output to your virtual machine or to the device that is hosting your virtual machine is going to be slow, and that's going to impact the end users and the applications they're running. So the key here is that infrastructure issues have to be prevented. If something has happened and it's already impacting the end users, then you're too late. If your system's overloading, if it's overheating, if your hard drive is full, you already have a whole lot of users who are unable to run their virtual machines, run their applications, or get the services they're looking for. So the job of an IT organization is not just to manage these VMs. That's all very, very well and cool, and you're going to hear a lot more about it in the future. But make sure that the infrastructure they're running on not only is working, but to stop problems before they hit and start causing problems. So with that said, what questions should you be asking when you're looking at your infrastructure and how it can support virtual machines? Well, number one, how many virtual machines have you got running? And this is not as easy a question as you might think. You obviously can't manage anything if you can't find it or if you don't know where it lives. And virtual machines go up and down all the time. We've had customers, in fact, that specifically were looking for a solution to find out when they'd forgotten to turn virtual machines off. One organization, they would spin up a virtual machine for training purposes, and they were paying for that. And if the trainer forgot to turn it off and decommission it, that was something that would sit in the background, chewing up money and costing them. So understanding what they've got running, how many of them, is absolutely crucial. The next piece is, okay, so you've got a certain number of virtual machines. Where are they? All right? What devices are hosting them? And again, depending on your users and on your software systems, these things can be moved. They can be migrating all over the place, and there's not generally one solid list. You don't necessarily know, and you find things like, the virtual machine got shifted to some branch office where there's 5 people, one server sitting in a closet. How it got there, no one's completely sure, but we're starting to get bandwidth and hard drive issues, and everything's delayed because it's in, Timbuktu, and the rest of the users are in Texas. So this is the sort of information you're going to need to know to troubleshoot and figure out what's going wrong with your virtual machines. And then, of course, the important part is, are the host devices actually working the way they're supposed to? Are they consuming resources within acceptable thresholds, or are they exceeding those thresholds? And this is where, again, being proactive, you want to make sure that you don't get an alert when that host device is hitting 99% hard drive usage. You want to get warning earlier so you can do something about it. And that's just one device. You want to look at everything else around it. And this is where the rest of the infrastructure comes into. Is the upstream device down? Are there bandwidth leaks? Are you not getting the bandwidth you should be? Is everything slowing down because people can't get information into and out of it? Is the server room it's in getting hot? Is the temperature getting too high? Are the fans on full blast and everything's still slowing down or starting to cause errors? There's a lot of other factors that can impact those devices, and that's something you need to pay attention to before you start dealing with the actual virtual machine issues. And one way to do this, of course, is to spot trends. If you can do some trend analysis and look at how things work over time, it makes it a lot easier to figure out what the issues are and to either get ahead of them or resolve them before they're going to impact end users. A perfect example could just be something as simple as, hey, it's nighttime over there. Everything's going to work a little bit faster because it's cooler. Or, we've got a bunch of people who come in and, check the news every morning. So there's a block of time where video consumption, at 9 in the morning is really, really high, and you're going to see bandwidth issues. How do you resolve that? We just have a bunch of, perfect example, it's tax time. All of a sudden your demand for financial information and the demand by the accountancy groups or the accounting departments is massive. How's that impacting what you're going to do? If you have trend analysis, you can look and say, all right, this is when things happen. Here's how I can deal with it. Here's how I can prepare for it. Here's how I can mitigate any of these challenges. So with that said, how do you answer those questions? And one of the ways we strongly recommend answering them with is a tool that we make called WhatsUp Gold. What WhatsUp Gold can do is it can answer some of those questions like, where are my virtual machines? It will map your entire network, including all of your infrastructure and all of the virtual systems that are running on that infrastructure. And it creates this really nice dynamic interactive map where you can see at a glance where virtual machines are, what hosts they're living on, the status of those hosts, the status of those VMs, their relationships, any clusters, and I see everything in real time. And most importantly, you're seeing everything in context. You're not just looking at a virtual machine reporting system that tells you what's going on with your virtual machines. You're looking at what that virtual machine is running on, and you're looking at everything around it, upstream, downstream, all the other factors. And you can very easily jump from, okay, what's going on with my virtual machine to what's going on with the device underneath it with a click. You get to monitor virtual performance as well. You get not only their availability, but the CPU, the memory, the interface utilization, that's bandwidth basically, the migrations, where they're moving, and the overall server performance for the infrastructure that's supporting your virtual machines. And the best part here is that you can create custom dashboards and reports. If there are certain specific things that you particularly care about, it's trivial to put together an easy dashboard that gives you that information to run reports based on that information that can be on demand, or you can set them up to go automatically. We talked a minute ago about trend analysis. You can sit here and say, all right, how's this particular virtual machine cluster been behaving in terms of performance for the last 6 months, and you can pull that up and view that at any time. It makes it really, really easy to look at your virtual machines and their underlying infrastructure from a variety of different angles to figure out exactly what the problems are and to troubleshoot them effectively. And then finally, the big advantage, of course, of WhatsUp Gold is it has a very powerful and very sophisticated alerting system, and that's what's going to make your troubleshooting proactive. Like I said, you don't want to wait until it breaks. You need to know it's going to break and do something about it before that happens, and that's where alerts come in. You can set a threshold for anything: CPU usage getting too high, bandwidth usage getting too low, memory starting to hit capacities. You can set an 80% threshold or a 60 or a 70 or whatever you'd like, and then you can get an alert when that happens so you can resolve something, either free up some space, point it to some more space, move that virtual machine to another server, whatever you need to do. But you can get an alert, and that can be something that can pop up on your screen. You can get an email, you can get a text, and if you're on vacation or you've got an entire team that's handling this, it can go out through Slack or Microsoft Teams as well. So you're going to get a notification of when you have an issue or when an issue is starting to happen. And again, that's where the trends can come in too. If you happen to know that, things get really dicey on Thursdays for whatever reason. All right, that's when we can allocate more bandwidth, we can allocate more memory, we can move some of the virtual machines to more servers so things are distressed, and you can do all of that. But you can get alerted if that happens on a Wednesday, for example. So that's really, really powerful, and that's what's going to keep your infrastructure going. And you don't have to take my word for it, because Mark Singh is now going to give us a demonstration of exactly how you can see all of this with WhatsUp Gold.
Thank you, Mark. I am going to share my screen. Let me know if you're able to see it.
I'm seeing it.
Okay, very good. Okay, so this is the, for those not familiar, this is the WhatsUp Gold web interface. Today we're looking specifically at the virtual monitoring aspect of WhatsUp Gold. We currently support Hyper-V and VMware environments for virtual monitoring. As with everything else, it will start with a discovery where we will provide it with an IP address. Typically, it could be the vCenter IP address or a host IP. WhatsUp Gold does what we call discovery by association. So if it discovers a host, it will go ahead and discover all the VMs that are powered on and online at the time of discovery, and then we can enable monitoring. So what you're looking at here is a simple group or map of devices that includes, you'll see things like the data center here, you'll see the vCenter, and all of the hosts that it's connected to. So when WhatsUp Gold does a discovery over your virtual environment, it will find all of the hosts, it will find the VMs, and then you decide, okay, which of these do I want to monitor? And so anything you monitor in WhatsUp Gold then is now open for probing and querying for performance and that sort of thing. As Mark mentioned earlier, some of the data that you will get from these monitors or the virtual monitoring in WhatsUp Gold is performance data. So you'll be able to track things like disk utilization, memory utilization, CPU, and so on. Depending on what all is available or enabled, you have these by default set up in WhatsUp Gold. The discovery, as you see, you have all enabled here. So all of this data that we see here, like disk utilization and memory and so forth, we're grabbing these in this specific example through the VMware API. So WhatsUp Gold connects to your virtual infrastructure, and it's able to pull this information in through reporting. We could show you what CPU is like, what disk utilization is like, and since these are numbers that we could plot to a graph, we could set them up to where you could be alerted if it exceeds certain thresholds. So if, for example, disk utilization exceeds 80%, we can set up an alert for that. So beyond this, where we'll go is the Analyze section. You will find a virtual monitoring dashboard. And in the virtual monitoring dashboard, again, it will give you an option to choose all virtual devices, or you could go to specific hosts and see all of the associated VMs that are powered on that are being monitored by WhatsUp Gold. And this is a quick glance into my virtual environment here, where I can see how much CPU is being used, how much memory, disk activity, as well as interface utilization. All of these are items Mark mentioned earlier. So in this single view, I can take a look and get an instant view of anything that is using the most or doing the most, really, in terms of performance data. So again, this is data that WhatsUp Gold will pull from the virtual API, in this case VMware, and it will do the same for Hyper-V systems as well. So we're collecting this data, and WhatsUp Gold is reporting on the data. Any CPU utilization information that you see here, you can find them in the what we call the standard or the default performance reports, like CPU utilization, top 10 reports, and so on. We could go into my virtual interface, like a virtual group, like I'm showing here, and see data specific to these devices. I can run a top 10 report, and on all my virtual devices, I can see again in a nice single view here how they're performing in terms of memory utilization, CPU, disk, and so on, or any other custom monitor I apply to these devices. And there's also something called predictive trending that you can use for these reports, where we could track how they perform over time based upon the data we've collected. Is there a memory leak of some sort that's trending upwards? A report like this will be able to show you how the data that we've collected over time is trending. So that's that's the reporting aspect of it. There is another option called the VMware Events Report, where in this case what we're looking at are specific events that might have triggered. Let me see if there's anything from this host. Actually, I'm going to jump over to another view here. So under this VMware event, anything that happened, migration, any errors or any of that, those are also pieces of information that WhatsUp will pull from the virtual environment. When we go into settings, actions and alerts, and the alert center libraries, there's an entry here specific to both Hyper-V and VMware. And when you select them, you will see that you can set up alerting for any high availability error events or security related events or migration events. When you select other events, it will give you a list of errors that you could set up alerting for. So maybe there was a migration error, VM failover fail. A number of these are specific errors that are specific to, in this case, VMware. And so whenever any of these errors or events get triggered, WhatsUp can alert you about any of these. Finally, one of the other options that WhatsUp comes with in terms of monitoring your virtual infrastructure to be more proactive or dealing with the specific issues is to work directly with the virtual device. So if we were to let me see, I'm going to jump back to my other system here. So if you go into the actions and alerts section, you will find part of the many options of actions that can be taken when WhatsUp detects some anomaly on your network. Is you have the option for a VMware action. And what this allows you to do is point at a monitored host with the right credential. It will give you an option to load the VMs associated with that host. And from here, and you can pick a number of VMs, from here there are a couple things or several things that you could do as an action, right? So maybe it's something that you're monitoring, and as a result, obviously you want to be emailed, you want to be called, or whatever the other actions are. But in addition to that, we can do some type of self-healing type action using one of these operations. Maybe it's such an event that it requires a power off of a VM, or maybe suspension or restart. So any of these options you have available to you in your toolbox there when monitoring the virtual infrastructure using WhatsUp Gold. So with that, I will turn this back over to Mark, and we can open it up for any other questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. That was fantastic. And I know we've got some limited time here, but I've seen some great questions come in. And I'm going to address a couple of them right off the bat. One of the main questions has been, how is this licensed? And how do we pay for this? Is this agent required? Do you require an agent? WhatsUp Gold is licensed per device. Virtual monitoring is available as either an add-on capability for our premium edition, or it's included as part of our Total Plus edition, which is the Cadillac version that has all the bits and pieces. Every single individual virtual machine is going to be treated as a single device. So, that's how, and that's generally how we're licensed. The system is agentless. We are polling individual devices to get the information we need, and working with APIs for VMware and Hyper-V in general. I had a question too about what kind of organizations we service. We cover every single vertical, and anything from small networks with a dozen or a couple of dozen devices, right up to several thousand. Our sweet spot's really kind of a couple thousand or 2,000 devices with really any IT team of less than about 10 or 15 people. That's where we tend to work best, usually in the mid-market there. And that's going to vary depending on the network, depending on the requirements, depending on the actual goals. But pretty much, unless you're a Google or a Microsoft, we've got a solution that's going to meet your needs. So in terms of training videos, I've got some questions about that. We do have some online training. I have a question here about setup. And you can find any of our online training or publicly available information either on our website at whatsupgold.com. You'll find links there as well to both paid training and to our community, where there's a lot of free information, including a full knowledge base. If you'd like to know more, you're also, of course, more than welcome to simply get in touch with us. There's a big Contact Us link on every single page. We'd be more than happy to discuss exactly what your concerns are and what you're trying to do and how we could help out. There's a question. Oh, yeah, questions about reports. I mentioned dashboards, and I know that Mark showed a number of them. Anything that you see as a dashboard can pretty much be exported as a report. So either as a PDF or as an email or a comma separated value file, and those can be done manually or they can be automated. So the reporting structure is very robust. If we can, show you if we can report on it, we can make a report of it. Sorry, going through some of these. A lot of questions have come in. This is great. I think the only other questions I noticed that I want to kind of highlight are someone asked specifically how it can help reduce MTTR, or mean time to resolution. And that's kind of the entire raison d'etre or purpose of WhatsUp Gold. It's a network monitoring and diagnostic tool. So its entire point is to allow you to find and fix problems quickly, and being able to look at things from multiple angles and see everything in context is really what makes a difference when it comes to reducing MTTR. If you're jumping from VMware into a separate infrastructure monitoring system, or then into a separate, say, storage monitoring system, every time you do that, you're making things more difficult. It's going to cost you more time. There's studies, the analysts have done studies on this. The more tools you have, the more difficult it is to get things done efficiently and to get things done quickly. WhatsUp Gold lets you see everything in context and makes it very easy to figure out what the problem is and track it down. And I'm sorry, I think you guys, our team here might have a better view of what's coming in, because they're frankly coming in faster than I can respond to some of them. I have one question here about encryption capabilities. WhatsUp Gold can be run in a FIPS encryption mode on Windows servers that are FIPS encrypted, but overall sort of access control. The data being sent back and forth, I do not believe is encrypted, although Mark Singh might have a better take on that one.
One of the questions I saw, Mark, I wanted to ask you here that came in, and you may have answered this, is what virtualization hypervisors are supported to be monitored by WhatsUp?
And that's going to be Hyper-V and VMware. We know there are others out there. Those are the most popular ones that our customers are looking for.
Absolutely. And what about if folks want to get started, if they want to just try this out for themselves? Is there some sort of trial or evaluation they can do?
Absolutely. If you go to whatsupgold.com, you will see a great big red free trial button on every single page. That will get you our full Cadillac version Total Plus edition in a free version. It's good for 14 days and it gives you every single bell and whistle. And with effectively a unrestricted number, I shouldn't say unrestricted, I think it's 20,000 device restriction. So it's something you can play with, something you can try out. We also have at whatsupgold.com, if you don't want to download and install anything, a live virtual online demo that you can walk through, click on things, see how they look, see how it works, and you can take a look at that virtual overlay yourself and see how it shows up. So there's a lot of different ways to try it out and take a look at it and see what it can do for you.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, it sounds like a great opportunity for folks to try it out for themselves. I know I used WhatsUp Gold for many years. when I was an IT manager. It was a great product. So glad to have you all here on today's EcoCast event. And again, for more information, also I encourage everyone to check out the handouts tab there. There's a resource there for some additional information as well. Mark, it's been great to have you on the event today.